We're living in this weird paradox, right? We have all the information in the world right at our fingertips, but our actual attention, that's become the rarest thing of all, especially when we're sitting in a virtual classroom. We've all been there. The lecture just fades into background noise, and that urge to just open one more tab is, well, it's almost impossible to resist. But what if we've been looking at this whole problem completely wrong?
So check out this number. In her work, Dr. Een Nurhasanah points to research showing that a whopping 75% of online learners admit they're multitasking during virtual classes. I mean, that's 3 out of every 4 students. Their attention is just split. It's a huge attention crisis. And, the easy answer is always to blame the student. Oh, they just lack discipline or they can't focus. But this is where the book Epistemic Strategy comes in and just completely flips the script. It says, hold on a second. What if the problem isn't the student at all? What if the problem is that our digital learning spaces are just, frankly, not designed in a way that actually grabs and holds on to our attention? The issue isn't the learner, it's the design of the lesson itself.
So yeah, how did we even get here? This really gets to the heart of what we can call the digital classroom paradox. It turns out that the way we've traditionally taught online is built on a pretty shaky foundation, one that, kind of ironically, ends up creating the very attention crisis it's supposed to be solving.
And the difference is, well, it's night and day. On one side, you have what's called the content push model. This is your classic lecture, just dumping information, treating students like they're empty buckets to be filled up. And what does it lead to? Cognitive overload. But on the other side, you have the pull discovery model. Now, instead of pushing facts, this model creates intriguing information gaps, which turns the student from a passive listener into an active explorer. This is the big idea at the core of the epistemic strategy.
And the engine that powers this whole pull model is something called epistemic curiosity. Now, this isn't just a mild interest. It's a really powerful basic drive in our brains. You can think of it like a thirst for knowledge. It's almost a physical sensation, like hunger, that makes us need to solve puzzles, to figure things out, to close those gaps. And it's this exact drive that most online learning just completely fails to tap into. And look, this isn't just some nice-sounding idea. It is backed by some seriously fascinating science. So let's dig into the neurobiology of why creating this intellectual thirst is so incredibly powerful for learning and for memory.
So it's all based on something called George Lowenstein's information gap theory, and honestly, it's brilliant in its simplicity. Step 1, you present a puzzle or a question. Right away, that creates a gap between what you know and what you want to know. Step 2, your brain feels this gap as this kind of tension, almost like a mental itch that needs to be scratched. And finally, step 3, that uncomfortable little itch creates this powerful internal drive to go find the missing piece. All of a sudden, learning isn't a passive chore, it's an active hunt.
But here's the crucial part. The gap has to be just right. This is what we call the Goldilocks zone, and you can see it here in this inverted U-curve. See, if a problem is way too easy, you get bored. If it's impossibly hard, you just get anxious and give up. But curiosity, that feeling of engagement, it peaks right there in the middle, at that sweet spot of moderate uncertainty where the challenge feels tough, but you know what? It also feels solvable. The real art of teaching, then, is getting that gap perfectly tuned.
So what is actually going on in our brains when this happens? Well, in a word, dopamine. And here's the really key thing to understand. Dopamine isn't just the reward chemical we get when we find the answer. It actually surges during the anticipation of finding the answer, that wanting phase. That anticipation makes the hunt itself feel good, which boosts our focus and makes us stick with it. Then, when we finally get the solution, that reward signal tells our brain's memory center, the hippocampus, hey, pay attention, this is important stuff, store it away for later.
Okay, so the theory is solid, the science is cool, but how do we actually put this into practice? How do we go from just understanding this idea of intellectual thirst to actively engineering it inside a virtual classroom?
This really reframes the entire role of an educator, doesn't it? It poses this really fantastic question. How do we get teachers to stop being just content deliverers and start being mystery architects? People who can masterfully design these challenges that spark that very epistemic curiosity we've been talking about.
Well, here's one powerful strategy. Create some cognitive dissonance. You start with a fact that just completely shatters what students think they know. Imagine a history teacher asking, "What if I told you that the American Revolution wasn't actually about taxes?" That one question just blows up their existing mental model and creates an instant, powerful information gap. Their brain just goes, wait a minute,
That can't be right. And bam, they are hooked, actively trying to figure out what's going on.
The next big tool is narrative, just the power of a good story. So instead of presenting a topic like a boring list of facts, today we will learn the 3 causes of the Cold War. You frame it as a mystery to be solved. 2 superpowers, allies just moments before, suddenly became bitter enemies willing to risk nuclear annihilation. Why? What happened? Let's investigate. Just by changing the frame, you turn passive listeners into active detectives.
And this brings us to maybe the most powerful technique of all, resolution delay. You know that feeling when you're trying to remember an actor's name and you tell your friend, wait, don't tell me, I've got it. That feeling of tension, that is a learning superpower. By purposefully holding back the answer, you keep that information gap open. You max out that dopamine-fueled anticipation, and you make the final discovery so much more satisfying and way more memorable.
And what's really cool is we can use the digital tools we already have to do this. A collaborative whiteboard isn't just for taking notes, it's a place where students can map out their competing theories. Breakout rooms aren't just for small talk. They become these arenas where teams have to build a case and defend it. A real-time poll isn't for taking attendance, it's for showing a huge split in opinion in the class, which forces people to actually argue their points and have a real debate.
So when you put all of these different pieces together, the vision becomes about so much more than just improving attention spans. It's really about fundamentally humanizing the digital classroom and changing how we think about learning itself. You see, this strategy isn't just a gimmick to trick students into paying attention. It's about respecting them as thinkers. It is about, as the book says, restoring their cognitive sovereignty, their power over their own learning process, and giving them back the intellectual dignity that gets lost when you just treat them like a passive audience.
And the result of that? It's incredibly powerful. Because when a student really struggles with a tough problem, explores a few dead ends, and then finally has that aha moment, that knowledge is no longer just some fact they borrowed from a teacher. It's theirs. They earned it. And that creates this deep, authentic sense of knowledge ownership, which is the absolute bedrock of real, lasting learning. Ultimately, this is the big transformation we're talking about. By learning to see uncertainty, not as a flaw to be fixed, but as a tool to be used, we can completely change how we see online learning. That cold, flat screen stops being a barrier to connection. Instead, it becomes a dynamic, exciting laboratory of discovery, a place for exploration, for experimenting, and for genuine insight.
So I'll just leave you with this one central, kind of provocative question to chew on. For years, we've tried our best to make online learning as clear, as straightforward, as certain as possible. But what if that was the exact wrong way to go? What if uncertainty isn't a bug we need to patch, but is actually the most powerful, most humanizing, and most engaging feature we have?